There's just a quick delay as it prepares it, so we can just sit for a second. All right, great. Okay, hey everybody, I am Jen Kelchner, and welcome to our live Q&A today. I am joined with a good friend and colleague, Grainne Hamilton. She's a specialist in open digital badges, lifelong learning, open leadership, and enjoys developing creative solutions to complex challenges. She's also a pioneer in work that includes co-developing the blueprints for Cities of Learning UK, creating the concept of open badge-based learning and pathways to recognize competencies across formal and informal contexts and provide pathways to opportunities. I am so excited to have her here. She's also director of the We Are Open Co-op and a cooperative that works to spread culture, benefits, and processes of being open wherever they can. And we've done a lot of work together and enjoy the works that we do in the public sector related to open culture and open leadership and how that's expanding into the space of smart cities, connected cities, cities of learning. And so thanks for being with me today, Grainne. After this episode is over, I have loads of links back to Grainne's work and all of her recognition, the work that she's done with Mozilla, with open badging, the Cities of Learning UK, as I said, and the host of other things that she's done. She's fabulous, including links to her blogs. But I asked Grainne to join me today because, you know, this whole series that we've been doing is around really thinking about not just dealing with a pandemic, but a post-pandemic world. And now that we're essentially months into it at this point with really not a true end in sight, we do have to start thinking and pushing ourselves as leaders to think about the world that we're building afterwards. And so given the context of conversations I have had with Grainne, I really wanted to bring her in to talk about looking at lifelong learning and how education can shift and how we not just make student-centric opportunities, but citizen-centric opportunities. And so I'm gonna take a breath for a second and just say hello again to Grainne. Thank you for being here.
Lovely to be here.
Thank you. And if you have anything else to tell anybody about who you are or where you're located, I'll give you a second to do that before we kick off into questions.
Yeah, well, I'm nothing to add as to what I do, but I'm in Scotland and it's very sunny at the moment, which is very unusual. So I'm looking a bit sunburnt. So I'll apologise for Scottish skin in the sun. So
that's fine. It's extremely cloudy and gloomy in the southeast today. So I'm glad you have sunshine. That's great. So Grainne, I wanted to this is just conversational for people that don't know. If they have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the live chat or drop them into Twitter to us. But I wanted to think through the work that we've been doing in the last year with cities and helping them think about, or countries even we've been working with, trying to think about how to do education differently. And now we've had this complete, essentially, obliteration of everything we knew or thought we knew. You know, I think people in our group, in our peer group, we've been working on some of these concepts for more than a decade at this point, in different levels. And we've been making recommendations and advising on how to think about learning pathways or think about open leadership, for example, and open culture. And yet everybody thought they had time. They thought, maybe I'm a little bit behind the curve in terms of this open culture thing or digital transformation, but maybe it's not that bad. And then of course we have an event like this happen at global scale where nothing will ever go back to the way it was. It's absolutely impossible to ever go back to where it was. So now we have, you know, leaders of countries, of cities, of different institutions that are figuring out what to do now. Like, how do we even think about this? And so with everything on its head and everything coming into this restructure in phases and reopening in phases, how can we begin to create resilient structures and therefore opportunities for both citizens and students alike?
Yeah, I think we can actually really look to citizens to help with that. There's evidence that a lot of the learning that happens you know, that if you look at school children and where they're learning, where that learning comes from, apparently up to 85% of that actually happens out with the school gates. So learning is happening everywhere. You know, if you've been working in online learning, like we have for the last however many years, you know, we've always been able to say you can learn anywhere and at any time. And now suddenly everyone is having to do that because of the situation we're finding ourselves in. But you know what I think the sort of the pandemic at the moment is really highlighting is that even if people are sheltering in place in lockdown, we're still able to use our networks and our community and citizen-based solutions to continue learning. So, you know, there are probably two aspects to that. There's the aspect of, you know, parents who might be working, they're now working from home, and at the same time, they're trying to support their children's continual education. And, you know, I'm seeing posts from teachers saying, look, don't worry if you can't manage this. We know it's a struggle. You know, if you're just there for your kids, if you're just keeping them happy, if they're, you know, if they've got stuff to do, that's enough. We can pick up from there. So that's one side of it. But the other side is that actually, I think we're beginning to see sharing of resources. So communities are actually creating their own solutions to respond to this situation, where they're sharing activities. They're setting up, you know, groups on social media channels, you know, WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, whatever it is, and are sharing sort of worksheets or activity sheets or ideas for here are 9 ideas that you can do today. So that work and that sort of knowledge and that desire to be part of the solution is there, but we haven't really had structures or processes that have really enabled that to flourish. And so we're suddenly having to do this on the fly. But in fact, you know, there are ways in which we can support that in a more perhaps in a more accessible way across the board. So one of the things that you mentioned I've been working on in Cities of Learning, what we looked at there was how you could enable place-based learning using technology to underpin that. And the reason why place-based learning is interesting is that we are all, you know, we're global in some ways, but we still all live somewhere. We're all rooted to where we live. There are local needs, there are local agendas, there are skills gaps, etc., in a local context. And so making use of the wider city and all the players that you have in a city makes sense. So, you know, it was looking at how we could actually sort of broaden learning out beyond formal education, and looking at how do employers help us define what skills they're looking for, what are the skills gaps, so therefore what does formal education need to be providing for, but also what are the sort of civic opportunities, how do we help people to engage more with the informal learning opportunities that already exist in a civic context, you know, within our museums, our art galleries and so on. There are all these things there which provide learning opportunities in an informal context, but they're not, what's been sort of lacking is any link. There's no way to link those or to recognize easily some of the learning that's happened outside of formal contexts. So a lot of the work I've been doing in recent years has focused on open badges, which are essentially digital badges that allow you to recognize learning and share that across the web. So they work in different ways. Different platforms will allow you to use badges in different ways or create badges in different ways. They can embed learning opportunities within them, or they can just be the recognition, or they can be both. But one of the great things is that they allow you to link to digital evidence of your learning. So suddenly you could be tinkering away with a car and you're fixing it, and you take a video of you doing that, and why shouldn't that be something that's recognized as, well, you're actually learning, you know, all the skills that you're learning while you're doing that. Previously we had no way of recognizing that in a shareable or verifiable way. Now we can. And you know, so there are open processes that we can use that could help to create a bit of parity, I think, across the board, so that's not just about you know, people who people who come from sort of backgrounds that perhaps support them more with their formal education, because everybody's learning, everyone has skills, but we've kind of lacked the way of being able to really dig into those and kind of take the recognition to where the person is. It's happened in a place, it's happened in school, university, etc. Whereas now we can actually recognize learning wherever it takes place.
That would make my university student child very happy. We have this discussion all the time. So he's been studying anthropology as an example here. And he's just like, it's so frustrating because he said, to really understand human connection and human origin, human patterns, he's like, I need to be out with people. Why am I stuck in a classroom with a book? And of course, now he's stuck in his bedroom with books. But he's like, wouldn't I be learning more if I could actually travel and sit in villages and learn from the people directly? And so this is a conversation he and I had close to a year ago at this point. But, I've even felt that over time. Whenever I talk with people about learning agility, I feel like when I talk about myself, I'm like, if you look at me on a resume, on a piece of paper, I feel like it's kind of flat from my perspective, of course. And I'm like, but there's so much in my life that has developed this highly skilled individual. But to translate that back in a way that's, like you said, verifiable, that has some connections and links to be able to showcase that, so that an individual could be recognized for both their interests, both the self-education, that lifelong learning component we talk about, and then how that could then, help from a citizen civic engagement component, how we can help build solutions together, and then obviously educate and think about our work. Is it something that is, for people that may be hearing this for the first time, they may think it's wildly difficult? Are there easy ways and entry points to this as they're building this out?
Yeah, it is still new. So, a lot of people won't have even necessarily come across an open digital badge. But there are platforms, there are companies out there who have badging platforms. You search for badge platform, there'll be plenty that come up. Actually, We Are Open has a badge wiki as well, where we list the major badge platforms, and you can find out, about what they are, where they come from, case studies, good practice guides for developing your own badges, etc. So it is in some ways there are easy entry points, because you could badge anything, but and that's the part of being an open standard. So that opportunity is also a challenge, because if you can badge anything, it also means that you run the risk of badging anything and everything, and then those badges become valueless. So when you're actually then looking at implementing a badge scheme for a city, for a country, for an organization, then it becomes quite quickly more complex, because you realize how much you're actually looking at. You have to consider level, you have to consider trust. Are people going to value this? Or are people going to want to take the badge in the first place? Is someone going to trust this badge that receives it? Because again, once you open up who can recognize learning, then you have to build up new trust networks. So traditionally, if we saw a degree from a university, we will trust it, because we know that they go through plenty of QA, quality assurance processes. They'll have external verifiers come in to check their programs, etc. But we'll also trust probably some universities more than others. You've got your Russell Group, your Ivy League, etc. So when you open that out even further, you then have that issue of trust. How do I trust that if someone has recognized and given, say it's me, so someone's given me a badge, how do I trust that the organization that's given Grainne that badge really understood what they were looking for, really could make effective judgments about Grainne's ability with this. So suddenly we're actually asking everyone to be able to recognize other people's learning. We're actually asking people to be able to do assessments, to make judgments, and we haven't necessarily learned those skills. Some of the work a good friend of mine, Professor David Nicol, has done around the importance of peer learning and how that actually, the processes of evaluating learning of someone else helps you become a better learner yourself, because you begin to learn to make evaluative judgments. You're able to learn how what you should, if you're looking at an activity, you begin to learn how to identify what's good, what's a good outcome, an output for this, as opposed to something that's just wouldn't meet the bar. So therefore, what do I need to do to get myself to that point where I'm also doing those good, I'm delivering those good outputs. We've never really been taught that. That's something that is actually fundamental to what we do. If you're a manager, you're constantly having to assess the work of your team, of your business. If you're directing a business, you're constantly evaluating and making judgments. But it's not something we've necessarily formally been, we've been taught. And I think that could be a really good skill for helping with this context. And once we become more self-regulating learners, then we're able to we're able to make decisions and make better judgments about who we are, where we want to be, what we have to do to reach where we want to go. But certainly something that got me into an interest in badges in the first place is I know so many people who sort of will say, well, I don't have a degree, and they feel that they're lacking something with that. And that's ridiculous, because they've got so many skills. It's just those skills haven't been recognized in a formalized way that they've been able to share, or that others have been able to trust. So those are building the trust into something and building new trust networks is really quite fundamental to actually making these things work. So although, going back to your point, there's a sort of easy starting point, because anyone can create a badge, but actually creating badges of value that people are going to trust, and that are going to result or open up the opportunities that a traditional degree, for example, they might expect that to open up. That's a whole other area and question, and much more complex.
In your Open Badge Wiki, you mentioned, is there information there on the Open Badge standards, or what the rule would be around creating badges?
Yep. There's a link back. So the standard was actually created by Mozilla back in 2011. It essentially came out of a white paper where a group of guys at Mozilla had met up. I think they'd met up at a conference and were talking about the things that fall through the gaps, the skills that aren't recognized, that are actually really important. Over the last decade in particular, we've been talking more and more about employability skills. I don't think we've found an effective term for them, but soft skills, employability skills that are anything but soft. They're actually those sort of attributes like resilience, like emotional intelligence, etc., like agency, like empathy, that in fact more and more employers were realizing were needed as we use technologies, as technology moves so fast. So our world is constantly changing. We need to be agile. We need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to manage ourselves and our responses to that. And of course, the pandemic has just highlighted how important those things are. But again, there was no way of recognizing those. So you might have had a sort of some element of that coming into things like graduate attributes, where those more character traits or attributes were sort of being picked up to a certain extent. You also have things like award schemes like the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, for example, which I did when I was younger. And that was a sort of formalized learning experience outside of formal education. And that promoted volunteering and going out and doing, something in a physical context. So, climbing mountains, going out and camping, etc., where you're learning a lot of additional skills around resilience, around the ability to work as a team. You're learning leadership skills. You're learning how to survive in a challenging situation with people you might not know that well. There's some wonderful skills being learnt there. And they would be captured in something like the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. But other than that, there weren't very many opportunities for actually identifying those skills and recognizing those. And And so, that's where the digital badges standard essentially came from. So Mozilla, there's the Mozilla site, or the openbadges.org site, which is a great place to start to sort of see the background to this. The standard is now stewarded by IMS Global, who are a standards organization. So they are now stewarding the development of the standard. And it very much coming from Mozilla, it started off with very, very much that open philosophy. They're open badges, so they're supposed to be interoperable. You should be able to get a badge in one system and then take that badge and host it in another system, or share it in another system, display it in another system. You can download your badges. And the way a badge works is that, it's an image file, but it has metadata contained within it. And that data tells anyone that clicks on it who received the badge, what they received it for. And with some badge platforms, they will also allow you to link to or embed your digital evidence for your badge as well. And some will also actually embed a learning opportunity within the badge as well. So it becomes more than just recognition. It also is a way of presenting learning opportunities. And then where the pathways work comes in is that you can if you put a lot of badges together, you can begin to create pathways towards an opportunity. So you're actually creating stepping stones towards an opportunity through your badges. And those badges then define a learning activity to do. You capture the evidence of that, you're given the badge. So the learning, the evidence and the recognition all suddenly also become part of pathways towards opportunities as well.
We actually have a question. So before I move on to the last bullet point I kind of wanted to hit on in our session around cities and concepts there, but we have a question of how can a current undergrad university course be converted to a badged series of micro courses? Or is there any advice?
Well, I'd recommend actually looking at some of the work that Deakin Digital have done in this. They've created badged master's courses. And the way they've done that is they have taken their course and created modules from the course, and then provided a capstone course at the end. So you could do one module and gain a badge for that. And you could walk away with that. That might be all you want. You don't necessarily want the master's. You just want the badge to show that you have project management skills, for example. But if you build up all of those badges, those 9 badges, and then you do the capstone course, then you end up with a master's degree. Because they're issuing that in a university context, obviously you've got high stakes assessment is involved in that. So you need to be sure that the evidence is absolutely, from the person who you need to know that the person creating it is the person that you're allocating the badge to. So they chose to do assessment, to deliver their assessment by not only providing your own digital evidence, but then they would have a video panel, a video call with a panel of experts. I think they had 3 experts. You had to answer questions. I can't remember actually off the top of my head what the other stages of that were, but it was a multi-stage assessment process, which involved submission of materials, but then that was also checked by a live panel discussion as well. So I think the first, where you start from, the good points that you have as a starting point for a university course is you'll already be very clear about your learning objectives. So you could look at splitting up how it's delivered to the learning objectives. You certainly need to think about if someone just wanted to do a sort of pick and mix, so they just want to pull out 5 of those 9 badges and they're not bothered about the whole degree, how are you going to charge for that? Are you going to charge for the badge? So perhaps the learning is free, but you charge for the recognition, which is a sort of common business model now. But also thinking then, what would these independent badges, how valuable would they be? What what can someone actually just take them and think, yeah, that's all I need? Because we are learning demographics are changing. A lot of there are far more learners now in work and who are doing part-time study. And sometimes you don't necessarily want the whole degree, but you do want the specific thing and you want access to those experts. So thinking about standalone modules and how they would build up, sort of scaffold up to something bigger as well is probably a good approach.
Thank you. Of course, I could talk with you all day, but being respectful of our time, I kind of wanted to just at the end here kind of talk a little bit about, since we have joint interest in working with countries and cities across the world to help those leaders think about the systems they're putting in place from a digital transformation standpoint, we'll say. But when we talk about smart cities from a place of connection and from a cities of learning concept, let's talk a little bit about how that impacts like closing skills gaps, changing some of the percentages around unemployment or employment, just the whole agility and adaptability component that comes in when we start connecting cities or countrywide, but thinking about student and citizen centric design. How can we look at that going forward in the future?
Yeah, I think there are a few things. So, engaging with stakeholders from across the city, from across the country, getting that input. So like we've discussed at the start, where citizens already are creating solutions, employers are already creating badges because, they have skills needs and they know they need to get these sorted soon. So there are already developments going on, and I think we're missing a trick if we don't engage with all of those stakeholders. In terms of sort of city contexts, there's civic learning opportunities, and having some way of connecting those to the formal learning opportunities creates a more resilient picture, because then if the formal learning opportunities suddenly are hit, like we're finding in the current situation, you still have the processes and the abilities and the sort of wherewithal. People have an understanding of how they can still engage in learning, recognize learning, share their learning. So you're building resilience in just by creating, taking learning and recognition out of the silos that they've kind of traditionally been in, of just formal education. For me, a big part of this is actually supporting engagement from disadvantaged groups. We need to look at, the worst thing for me is to have another educational program that just gets used by people who are already very capable and have that background or whatever that helps them to engage with the sort of latest educational opportunity. So taking learning to individuals becomes then very important and very powerful, and we need to start, I think, recognizing that skills exist where we haven't formally recognized them. So if you're someone that has a great, you've got a group of friends and you're the one who always organizes the social side, that's a skill. These things are skills, and we need to start recognizing those, because especially when you get into pathways and badge-based pathways, and you can see how a skill like Lego, for example, as a child, you're playing with Lego, you can actually create a pathway from Lego and building with Lego right through to becoming mechanical engineer. It was a path I actually did for a friend of mine who now has a very successful consultancy as a mechanical engineer. But it started with Lego, building things, taking it apart, getting to understand how things work. And actually, when I did the same with interviewing people at Mozilla as to how they got into their jobs, the range of skills they talked about, actually very few were to do with formal education. I'm not lambasting formal education here, but it was just very interesting how much actually was, well, in fact, I go rock climbing and I go mountain biking, and I also, I'm a DJ, and I chop wood and I do creative writing classes, but I also happen to be the architect for the Open Badges standard. There's no surprise those things all go together, and those are true those are true attributes of the person who actually was the architect for the Open Badges standard. He had all these creative philosophy, creative writing, etc., thoughts as well as, and skills as well as the technical skills. So I think it's really important we actually recognize those skills and for how important they are. And that will also help bring in some of those disadvantaged groups, because a lot of people don't respond well to formal education, or at particular times in their lives don't respond well. They might go back to it at a later point. But what the worst thing would be is if they feel that actually they don't have any skills at all, and learning's not for them, or certain careers aren't for them, because they very well could be if we actually help them to see that some of those more granular attributes and micro skills actually are key to a sort of trajectory towards a certain career. So I think pathways, taking learning and recognition to people would really help build up some of that resilience.
Man, that's the stuff that speaks to my heart, because I've been saying, when I work with people just in the last 10 years, I've talked a lot about, looking outside of what you've been paid to do and looking outside of your formal education, because your life experience will yield a lot of skills that are important right now. It's why for me, change is super easy, as my entire life has been a constant cycle of change and chaos. And so it's a comfort space for me. So I'm able to help people navigate that in a way that's a little more simplified, because I understand the landscape of chaos and
Yeah.
transformation. And I think especially when you talk about underserved groups, underrepresented groups, people that have had challenges their entire existence,
Mm-hmm.
have learned things like adaptability and agility, and how to solve problems in
Yeah.
unusual ways, because they have to, from either a survival standpoint or whatnot. And there's so much lost opportunity in people who think in a way that would be incredibly useful right now. And so being able to think about tapping into that, which would then serve a community in an entirely different way, not just the people that are then able to showcase their experience and skills and learning, but the community at large from a civic perspective, how problems could be solved within communities and within cities by using the talent that already exists, and then perhaps backfilling some of the other type of education, which is the teachable things, right? The things that are easier to learn by showing somebody a particular skill that would come through formal education on a particular topic, like a project management, or how to use a set of tools, or a certain type of expertise, like within the engineering field, for example, which, but a brain needs to kind of work that way anyhow. So that's really, really important. And I think I had a thought before I got off on what my heart was talking about there for a second, but it was really just kind of tying that up within cities to think about how badging and pathways like this, learning pathways and creating this connection, allows for cities then to be able to showcase not just learning opportunities, but work opportunities, right? So
Yeah.
this would then, if they begin to think about this connection instead of everything being so siloed, and this is an education institution and this is a workforce development program, and then this thing over here is different, but to look at this ecosystem as a connected, thriving, organic, living being, if you will, then they're able to start showing not just learning opportunities, but work opportunities, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, and some of the work that I've done has looked at that, and with the series of learning blueprints, there was always an opportunity endpoint to any pathway, or milestone on a pathway. It doesn't need to be an endpoint, but that could be an employment opportunity. It could be an opportunity to go in and, an interview, a fast-tracked interview. It could be going in and finding, out more about that organization, getting access to someone in the organization, or it could be a civic opportunity or another learning opportunity. So, the digital badges and kind of this way of thinking about recognition then suddenly becomes a currency. At the moment, we think of sort of degrees and so on as currency in a way anyway. They unlock access to things, but that world is changing. Companies there are a number of companies now who don't require a degree. It used to be that there was a time when sort of for anything you needed to have a degree, and now that's not the case, because companies are recognizing that there are other ways of showcasing your skills. So, but it was still an element of currency. And so badges can be the same. They can unlock opportunities. So you work along a pathway and you get all the badges, that opens up an opportunity. An example of this, I did some work with Sussex Downs College in England, and they have a thriving hospitality industry in the county, and we're wanting to identify, how do we make sure that we send the most appropriate students to interview? How do we, you know, how do we get our students to stand out as well? So they talk to the hospitality industry, people, you know, the leaders in that area, and they said, we need, you know, we're getting the hard skills, that's fine. We're on your industry advisory board, so you know the hard skills we are looking for, but there's something extra which we need, which is reliability. We need to know that they are going to turn up. So if the bus doesn't turn up, that they're going to find some other way of getting to us. You know, that those are the people we're really, really looking for. So they took that and decided to create a reliability badge. And they did that. It was a lovely solution in many ways, because they just did it by attendance records. So they didn't need to do anything extra, but if you had 90% attendance or above, then you would get this badge. I think you might have had to write an extra blog post or some kind of reflection about, you know, about the importance of attending, or importance of being a reliable person. And once you got that badge, that unlocked a fast track to an interview with a local hotel. So there was a real opportunity gain from doing that, but it actually didn't require extra work on the part of the college to do it. So that's quite a low level example, but it's a very real one. That's what the industry were saying, we need this. So the college were able to respond. Yeah, I think there's, you know, there's the discovery, there's providing means, there's providing confidence and helping people build confidence and motivation. But the badges can actually fulfill many of these sort of functions. They can help create pathways. They can actually signpost ways towards opportunities, help people to discover. So when I was working on Cities of Learning, I interviewed students in Plymouth, and they had, it was funny actually, because it just split right down the middle as to how they looked on this. We had students from the art college and students from the local STEM college. So techie students, art students, and we asked them, what kind of pathways would you want to see if we were building some kind of platform or some kind of model? What would you look for? And the STEM student said, we want to see the stepping stones towards something. So they wanted to be games testers, for example. We want to see, what badges do we need? What skills do we need to get to that, to open up an opportunity for an interview for that job, for example. The art student said, and it really was this black and white, the art student said, we don't know what we want to do. We know we've got these artistic creative skills. We know the world's changing. We want ideas for the kinds of things that our skills could lead us to. So there are two different kinds of pathways. There's destination pathways and there's interest-based pathways, and both are extremely powerful, and both you'd probably use them at different points in your life. You might be at a point in your career where you just know, I just want to know what I need to do to get this. Or you might go, I've got these skills, I want to do something different. You know, what would be open to me? And you'd want to see sort of the kinds of opportunities that could stem from a starting point of a particular skill.
And that could be so important for people, because
yeah.
of course, I'm always excited by the discovery, because as somebody who kind of is constantly in a state of innovation, like I just want to create new things. And so I love the curiosity I have, loves that discovery to figure out, is this me? Is it not me? And I think that there are so many, especially our younger generation, who feels so stuck and stifled in, I don't know yet who I want to be, or I don't even know yet if this interest that I have is going to pan out long term, or I don't, you know, they're in that discovery, self-discovery and self-awareness process. We all are at all points in our life, yes, but I think about our younger students who are Another personal example, my son's girlfriend is graduating this month with a psychology degree, and she had a very specific niche within it. And of course, now with the pandemic, she's like, I don't know what my work opportunities are going to look like. I don't even know if my internship is going to follow through. I don't know anything anymore. And she's always asking, like, should I even be doing this? Did I pick the wrong thing? Like, what happens? And my encouragement to her is there's so much in what you want to do with this and why you're interested in it that may not even exist today,
Yeah.
not just because of the pandemic, but because we've been seeing for some time, when futurists are looking at statistics, and correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say it's by 2030 that all like 80% or 85% of the jobs that will exist by 2030 currently haven't even started yet today, which
Mhm.
seemed absurd 4 or 5 months ago to some people, but now we're like, oh, I
Yeah.
understand. Now I see why. But I think there's students like that are finalizing degrees in their education and are still sitting and going, okay, but now what? I did the thing that you told me to do in this order and steps you told me to do it, but there's still no opportunity. And I don't even know if this is the right way to do it. And having these interest-based pathways, I think, would be massively helpful to, one, reduce stress for people, to be able to have an opportunity to explore what actually ignites a passion and connects with your personal creativity.
Yeah.
Because I think there are people misunderstand even creativity. The creativity intelligence often is, well, that must mean art or music or graphic design or imagination or filming. Like they only think of a creative art versus understanding that creativity is just solving a problem,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that
Mechanical
might be your
engineers are
engineer.
creative. Yeah, exactly. Or maths, people who are doing maths at a high level are massively creative. Yeah, it's something which whenever I can, I will say it's not STEM, it's STEAM. If you don't have the arts, if you don't build in an awareness of why, and it's not like you're just saying that it's not about the arts, it's about that creative mindset. It's about that ability to explore, be curious, to to deal with ambiguity, to be happy with ambiguity. Those are traits, characteristics or attributes that are extremely helpful at the moment, being able to deal with a complete change and not be so thrown off by that, to have this sort of mental agility and resilience for that. Yeah, and when I'm doing work that didn't exist when I was at school, and my career, I always used to say I don't have a career because I'd never know where I'm going next. I really wouldn't. And it was only in hindsight, and actually only a few years ago, that I really said, oh, those are the common, threads that run through. And
Sense
at
now.
times, yeah, exactly. And you were always asked, well, what do you want to be in 10 years time? I have no idea, hopefully doing something interesting. But yeah, that's and that creativity, the people, I have a drama theatre arts degree, and people can't relate that to the fact that I'm working in tech, but I work in tech as to how can tech help us, how can we use it to create a better and fairer world, is kind of my, the thing that inspires me, the thing that makes me want to do something is, okay, can this help us actually do something better, or is it going to be fairer, is it going to be more equitable, whatever. So yeah, that's I've lost my train of thought.
Okay, we were figuring out who we
Yeah,
want to be in the next life.
yes, yes, that's right. They are. So yeah, that creative mindset, there are people who've been at Glasgow School of Art, for example, good friends who now run, design service design agencies. And it's about future thinking. That the work that I do with my colleagues, that, we are open, we all have a kind of creative mindset, even if people see us as working in tech. So I think that creativity, that exploration, that curiosity is really important. And in fact, it was one of the things that came up when I interviewed I asked the HR person in Mozilla what they hired for us, as well. We were doing the work on the badge-based pathways, and she just immediately said, curiosity. We want people who are curious. So you might be the best tech person in the world, the best coder, best programmer. If you're not curious, if you're not thinking about how to do something better, thinking laterally, thinking outside the box, then you're not helping us move things forward. So I think we all need to tap into a bit of that now, because we do, we're in sort of, it's going to be a new way forward. So we can all feel a bit more resilient, I think, if we're helping people to be comfortable with discovery, curiosity, creativity.
I love that because I think the curiosity is, for me personally, I always feel that it's this, like this inner voice that's going, what if, right? So what if? And I think that people often feel that, and there's many reasons, right? Culturally and different societal norms that drive us to say, um, this concept around perfection. It has to be a certain way. It has to have a certain outcome. And we get so locked in that rigidity instead of just the adaptability place of just going, but what if? This
Yeah.
may not work, but what if? And I think that people miss that the people that have changed history, that have changed the world, that have created the innovations that we consider our basic foundations today, started because a series of curiosity that led to experiments that didn't work. Most of them didn't work until they found the thing that did work. And I think that right now, specifically, thinking about how we can empower people to take that what if question or that what if thought and explore it in a way that solves problems. And so that's obviously the whole kind of underpinning to what we're talking about today. And I absolutely could talk to you forever about this topic, but I want to be respectful of time, so we've already gone over a little bit. So I just want to give you a chance, if you have any kind of like a closing statement or anything, if you want people to reach out to you for anything specifically, feel free to plug that here. Of course, I'll have all of Grainne's links below as we wrap up today. But I'll just kind of give you a second if there's anything you want to tie out.
Sure. No, just I think that the sort of idea of cities of learning, smart cities, etc. I think there's some really interesting work to be done there. And when we're thinking of the tech, I think we really, really need to make sure we're remembering the people. It's about the people in the end. So I'm very interested in that area still. So if people are interested, also feel free to reach out. Happy to have a chat about that.
Great. Thank you, guys. Those of you that joined with us live and submitted questions, thank you so much today. And again, thank you to Grainne. And we look forward to talking to all of you soon. Thank you.